Good afternoon, everyone. On Who's Right, we are very happy to have Congressman Paul Ryan here as our guest this afternoon. Welcome to you,
Thanks.
Paul.
Nice to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Yes, we're happy to have you. You know, one of my favorite quotes is Charles Krauthammer. He said, "Paul Ryan leads and Obama follows." Have you ever heard that quote?
From Charles Krauthammer, right?
Yes. You have been so courageous and so brave and laid out such a wonderful plan that is so fresh and innovative, and it is called the
Path to Prosperity.
The Path to Prosperity.
That's our
yes.
new budget, which is a follow-up to our America's Future, our Roadmap for America's Future.
The Path to Prosperity is. So I would like, you know, I have heard you on so many talk shows give like 3 minutes here, 2 minutes there, and you know, and I'm like, wait, I didn't get that. What was that? I don't know. So I would like you to take as much time as you can to lay out the plan
Sure.
to us today in your own words, beginning to end. And I will not say I won't interrupt you, because I
That's
will,
fine.
because I, like all Americans, need to know the answers to some questions.
Sure.
But please lay out the plan for us
Sure.
and tell us about
So
it.
this is the budget that was passed by the House Republicans.
Uh-huh.
And we decided to put a budget out to fix this country's fiscal and economic problems. There are basically 4 things we achieve with this budget. Number 1, we've got to put in place policies that get the economy growing and create jobs. If you want to fix our fiscal problems, which we're going right to a debt crisis. And if we want to preempt and avert a debt crisis, you've got to do a couple of things. Grow the economy, create jobs, get spending under control. So in the first category of trying to create jobs, we're proposing for fundamental tax reform so that our families and small businesses and all businesses can be more internationally competitive. We're proposing to drill for oil and gas here in America so we can be less dependent on foreign oil and gas, more dependent on U.S., bring prices down, and create jobs here in America.
Create jobs here in America. How do you do that?
So right now, we tax a lot of our businesses a lot more than our foreign competitors tax theirs. We're no longer in the 20th century, we're in the international fierce competition of the 21st century. And so when we tax our employers more than our foreign competitors tax theirs, they win, we lose.
Right.
So just like President Obama's Bipartisan Fiscal Commission recommended, we propose fundamental tax reform to lower tax rates across the board and broaden the tax base. Fundamental tax reform is one of the secrets to economic growth and job creation. That's not just a Republican thing.
Right.
Like I said, that's what the President's Fiscal Commission recommended.
Okay.
Now, one of the other things, that's point 1. Point 2 is we believe we need to fix the social safety net. Our social safety net is tearing apart at its seams. It's going bankrupt. And our social safety net has been more geared and oriented toward keeping people on welfare than really getting people back on their feet into jobs and lives of self-sufficiency and flourishing lives.
Sure.
Welfare reform in the 1990s was extremely successful, but it really only reformed one program of dozens of federal welfare programs. And so we propose to reform our welfare system with an eye toward giving states flexibility so they can customize their policies to meet the particular needs of the unique populations, but with an eye toward getting people back on their feet. One of the things that we propose within this is to consolidate the dozens of different federal job training programs, which we really don't measure to see whether they're successful or not, into career scholarships. So that a person who loses their job in an industry that is going away can go back to school and get a new skill, say at MATC or Blackhawk Tech or UW system, to get a new career.
Well, how do they pay for this new career?
This scholarship is what pays for their
Who pays for the scholarship?
We got 49 different job training programs spread across 9 different government agencies. They're very ineffective. We don't even measure whether they work. So we're saying take that money, consolidate it into a scholarship so that it can be used by a person who loses their job, by a person who gets displaced from an industry like auto, where I come from in Janesville, that no longer exists, and take that scholarship to finance their tuition so they can go back to school to get a new job. These are just a handful of the ideas that we're talking about in repairing our social safety net.
Okay.
To get it toward getting people back on their feet. Point number 3 is we've developed, I think, a consensus in this country that we want to have health and retirement security for not only all Americans, but especially for people in old age. Our problem is these programs, especially Medicare and Medicaid, are going bankrupt.
Right.
The trustees at Medicare just last week told us it's going insolvent 5 years faster than we thought. These are the
Really?
biggest drivers of our debt. So our unfunded liabilities, meaning the promises government is making to all Americans, my mom's generation, my kids' generation,
Right.
they're about $100 trillion out of balance. Meaning, according to the General Accountability Office, the government, and this number is tough to get your mind around,
Right.
the government's making $100 trillion worth of promises that it has no way of keeping. And so what we're saying is we've got to fix these programs so that we actually do have health and retirement security for all Americans.
But where does that $100 trillion come from? How do you stimulate the economy or do whatever you have to do to grow that money back?
So that's a good question. So the way our government programs work today is they're collapsing under bankruptcy. And what the government measures is what promises is government providing current Americans and how much money are we shy of actually fulfilling that promise. That was $62 trillion 2 years ago, $76 trillion a year ago, $99.4 trillion today.
Wow.
So every year we kick the can down the road, we get that much deeper in the hole. Now why is that? When most of these programs, such as our healthcare and retirement programs, were created in the 60s, men lived into their 60s, women lived into their 70s. Today,
Right.
men live into their 70s and women live into their 80s and their 90s.
Right.
What's more, when these programs were created, baby boomers were babies or teenagers, now they're retirees.
Yes.
And so we have a demographic challenge as well. We're going from 40 million retirees to 77 million retirees, meaning a 100% increase in the retirement population, but only a 17% increase in the tax-paying population. These are pay-as-you-go programs. Current workers pay current taxes to finance the benefits for current retirees. Other problem we have is healthcare costs. They grow a lot faster than the economy grows. What all of these things end up doing is they put our budget, our government, on an unsustainable course. 3 programs with the interest, Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security, plus interest on our debt, consume every penny of federal revenue by 2025. So we've got to do something to arrest this bankruptcy. We have to do something to avert a debt crisis. And what we're basically saying is, let's do it now on our own terms in a smart way so they don't have harsh European-like austerity. The Europeans waited until they had a debt crisis, till the bond markets turned on them. So what are they doing right now? Painful across-the-board cuts to everybody and the people who need government the most, the elderly and the people who live on the safety net. Tax increases that are slowing down their economy. So here's what we say. Don't change these benefits for people 55 and above. The whole point we're making is, if you're already retired, or if you're 10 years away from retiring, you've already organized your retirement around these promises that government's made you. So we want government to be able to keep these promises. And what our budget does is it guarantees these promises. But the only way we can do that is if we reform these programs for the future, stabilize our debt so we don't have a debt crisis. So for those of us who are 54 and below, we propose to change Medicare in particular to work like a system like I have in Congress, to work like the prescription drug benefit or Medicare Advantage works today, where we have a choice of guaranteed Medicare coverage options to pick from, and then Medicare subsidizes our plans. But if you're a wealthy person, it won't subsidize it nearly as much. If you're a middle income class person, it will subsidize it more, and if you're poor and sick, it will subsidize it even more, so that we can have choice and power as consumers, make providers compete against each other for our business. But what this does is it makes Medicare safe and solvent, and it gives us the ability to cash flow and keep the promise to current seniors, people 55 and above. Now, the
Right.
last point.
And that makes sense. And you're talking about means testing.
Yes,
That's
for the
what you're
future
talking
Medicare,
about.
not for current Medicare recipients, but people 54 and below when they become Medicare eligible.
Right. The problem with that, as people say, is say you're a multimillionaire at 55 and some catastrophe happens and you lose all of your money. Are you then able to flip over?
It's every annual income, your annual income in the year in which you decide. So if you're
okay.
making $1 million in income one year and then something happens and you go to making $20,000 the next year, Medicare would reflect that reality.
I see.
Yeah.
So it makes sense. So it does make sense to me.
What we say is target the money to the people who need it the most, more support for those who need it the most, and less support to those who need it the least. The alternative is bankruptcy. And the alternative is everybody gets hurt now. This is a very different approach than what the president has proposed with Medicare. His new law proposes starting next year to put 15 people, 15 individuals he will appoint head of a rationing board that basically price control Medicare. That affects current seniors. And this
Wow.
board is now giving targets,
Right.
$500 billion now, he's proposing to do more, for them to unilaterally decide how Medicare works and at what prices Medicare providers get reimbursed. That will lead to more and more Medicare providers dropping coverage, abandoning, leaving Medicare. That's according to their trustees, the actuaries.
Right.
And that will harm the quality of Medicare for current seniors. And we're saying, don't do that.
No.
Keep Medicare going for current retirees, but in order to keep that promise, you've got to reform it for my generation. A, so that we can get our debt under control, but B, so that we actually have a system we can count on. And then
Yes.
don't subsidize wealthy people as much as everybody else. Now, the last final point I would make is we need to put in place a plan to pay off our debt. Because I just think it's unconscionable, you know, as a father of 3 kids who are 6, 7, and 9 years old, to knowingly pass on to them a debt burden that will guarantee they have a lower living standard.
Well,
A debt burden that guarantees they don't have the American dream like we had.
Don't we have to cut spending?
That's what we're talking about. Our budget.
How can we cut spending? How can we do it?
So our budget proposes to cut $6.2 trillion of spending over the next 10 years. Now it proposes to cut spending in discretionary agencies, to federal government agencies, to take back all the big spending increases. We propose cuts to the Defense Department. We propose cuts to all government agencies. We also proposed, like I said, to reform these entitlement programs. And that over time brings spending down in line to where it historically has been. The problem with spending is, for the last 60 years, we've taken about 20 cents out of every dollar made in America to pay for the federal government. On the current path we are on, by the time my kids are my age, we'll be taking 40 cents out of every dollar made in America just to pay for this government at that time. So yes, the key problem is spending. And so we have proposed a budget that has specific spending cuts, but also spending controls and caps on spending to make sure that that occurs so that we can pay off this debt. Our plan, according to the Congressional Budget Office, actually pays off, not just balances, but pays off the debt over time so that we can, in fact, give our kids a debt-free nation so that they, too, can have a shot at the American dream of prosperity.
So what kind of cut on spending do we make?
The spending is going up to 40% of our economy. We want to keep it, bring spending back down. Right now, it's at about close to 25%.
Okay.
We want to bring it back down to 20 cents on the dollar.
Okay.
To
I
to
see.
using that metaphor.
Okay, that's simple.
Sure.
That I understand.
Among the things we're talking about is go after corporate welfare. Trim back farm programs that are going to wealthy corporate farms.
Okay.
Lots of things we're talking about. And you can go to our website at www.budget.house.gov if you want to see a full list of all these things.
I see. Okay. That makes sense. Your plan makes sense, and I understand it.
And the only thing is, it's the only plan that's been offered. The unfortunate thing is
And-
the president hasn't offered a plan, neither has the Senate Democrats.
That's true.
So we're kind of negotiating with
And-
ourselves right now.
Yes, you are. And how are you going to get this plan through the Senate? This is the question. How are you going to get it through
That's
the
not going to
Senate?
happen this year. I can just tell you, next week we're going to have a vote in the Senate, and it's very clear to us that they probably don't have the votes to pass any budget plan. As you know, Harry Reid is the Senate Majority Leader. They
Yes.
control the Senate.
Yes.
Not only do we not, because we're in the minority, to have the votes to pass our plan,
Mm-hmm.
it looks like they will not pass a budget plan of their own. So that means the entire budget process
Nope.
stops. So the House passed its budget by the statutory deadline, April 15th. We're still waiting for the Senate to pass one. It looks very clear that the Senate, again, for the second year in a row,
Once again, we
won't pass
have
a
no
budget.
budget.
And that means we have no budget. That means we have no budget
That is-
process.
that's insane. That's insane.
I don't know any family or business that can keep going on without budgeting its finances.
So you're saying we basically have to wait until we get a new president in?
I
Is that-
unfortunately think that that's probably what's going to happen. I think it looks like since the budget process is going to break down this year, I think we'll move over to discussing the debt limit. And then what kind of spending cuts and controls we can have accompanying the debt limit. That won't be a full comprehensive budget. But in our opinion, it's got to be a substantial down payment on spending cuts on our debt, which will buy us time and space in the credit markets
I see.
so we don't have a borrowing problem, so we don't have an interest rate problem to get our economy, to stop hitting our economy with the threat of higher interest rates.
Right.
And I think you're right. I think it needs new leadership in Washington because the kind of leadership we have right now, the President has yet to propose a plan to fix our fiscal problem.
Right.
The Senate won't even pass a budget. And so we are at that kind of an impasse where the House has acted and nobody else has.
Right.
And unfortunately, I think this stalemate is going to continue into 2012.
Yeah. Well, speaking of new leadership, are you running for president?
No, I'm not. I think I can do more where I am right now as the chairman of the House Budget Committee, working on these issues, offering solutions, and getting this debate going.
I see. Well, there's always 2016,
Well,
and there's 2020.
Who knows? That's so far away. Who knows what we'll be doing by then?
Yeah, well, we would love to see you run. And thank you so
Thank you
much
very
for
much.
joining
Appreciate
us
it.
today. We really
Thank you.
appreciate it. So thank you very much, audience, for joining us in at Who's Right today. And as you know, this is the show where you decide. So we wait for your opinion. Go to whosright.org and let us know what you think. Thank you for joining us.